Doug Aldrich from the Dead Daisies. Welcome to Australian Musician.
Thank you for having me, Greg. Nice to be here, man.
Tell me about being an international musician during a pandemic. Is there any upside to it at all?
Well, I mean, it's been pretty brutal it's been for me. It's been a little weird, but it's been brutal for a lot of people, more so than us. But I've been able to get through it, just juggling being a dad and doing some house renovations, and then the obvious daisies. We do a lot of social media, and so there's been no advantage for me. But like I said, I can't complain. I mean, I'm very lucky. I've so far not gotten it.
Yeah. I just wanted to go way back just for a couple of minutes. When you
Sure.
were learning guitar, what were the licks and the albums that you tried to replicate?
Well, it started off. I was first really. The first thing I remember trying to learn was a Peter Frampton song, "I Give You Money." It was from the live album version, and it was a pretty simple riff, and I was trying to learn that. Prior to that, the first real riff that I tried to learn that I didn't play it correctly was "Smoke on the Water."
Yeah.
And I was playing it in the wrong key and whatever, but I knew in my head, I could hear the intervals. I hit an E chord, and then I hit a kind of a open G and then an A, and I was like, that sounds like "Smoke on the Water." So I tried to play it in that rhythm, and it was my version, but obviously it's not played in that position.
Yeah. Well, was there a music store in the early days that you frequented that looked after you?
Yeah, there was I used to live in Maryland, in Rockville, Maryland, and there was a music store called Veneman's Music, and then we moved to and Potomac, Maryland. I lived there as well, but then later we moved to Philadelphia area, and there was a really cool store called Medley Music, and Medley Music was where I really spent a lot of money for a kid. As much as I bought an amp there, some effect pedals. That was and strings.
Yeah. You didn't try out your version of "Smoking on the Water" there, I hope?
By that time, I knew how to play it a little better and in the right key. That was a few years after, I'd been playing guitar. So I was playing stuff like playing some of the newer Fleetwood Mac. There was that song, "Don't Stop." It was like, kind of a pretty simple thing. And then Bachman Turner Overdrive had a couple of simple songs I was learning. And yeah, Zeppelin, I was trying to play "Whole Lot of Love." And I love Jeff Beck's "Blow by Blow" record, but I couldn't play any of that yet. That would come later.
Yeah. You joined the Dead Daisies in 2016. Were you aware of the band before that?
Yes, I had around 2015. I had seen that they had done a version of "Midnight Moses" that was really cool, and John Corabi and John Corabi I knew from high school, and there was a band in high school in Philadelphia that used to play that song, and so I thought, that's brilliant. John broke that song out with the Dead Daisies, and it was just, I thought it was done really well, and I thought the way they played it, Richard Fortus played it great, and Marco, and Brian Tishy, I just thought they were really good. I didn't really know David, and I didn't know of David, but I thought he was like, that's cool, all around great band.
Yeah. So you've just released a new album called Holy Ground,
Yes.
recorded at La Fabrique Studios in France. How long were you there? And tell me about the facility there.
It was a beautiful chateau that we were able to go to and work, and we, it was perfect for us to be able to go there and bond and basically just laser focus on what we wanted to achieve. We were basically living there. Our bedrooms were above the kitchen, and then we'd come down and have breakfast and go straight to recording or writing or whatever we were doing. And it was just really good.
Yeah. The album has a very powerful, full-bodied sound, I'd say more so than the last album. Was that always going to be the case?
I would say that's mostly due to Ben Grosse. Ben really is a phenomenal producer, engineer, and he set the tone right, from the get-go, that it was going to be he made it like a safe environment to be yourself and make mistakes and learn and do everything we needed to do as a band that's got a new member coming in. And as far as the sound goes, he basically let me get my sound, and then he manipulated it however he wanted to. Ben took the guitar sound and did some little tricks. I think he's really good with compression to make them really pop, that make the guitars really jump out of the mix. He would, when we were tracking, he would sometimes do the compression to the hard drive. So like it would go from my guitar into the amp, into the speakers, and then he'd mic up a cabinet, and then he'd send the mic into he used to use a DBX 165 compressor, and it was really touchy. He would just like breathe on it and be like, "Oh, that's killer," and then he would do it, just breathe on it a little more, and be like, "That's a little too much," or "That's not enough. It's missing that thing you had," So every time I came in, I was kind of busting him on like, it's got to be exactly the way you had it with that, because it would just go whack, whack, it really, really bark.
Yeah. And how many guitars did you have to play with in the studio?
Well, when we were in France, the majority of the guitars were done in France. I had a gold top Les Paul that's my favorite. It's a 57 reissue. And then I had a Scala guitar, which is kind of a chambered Les Paul style, but it's chambered, so it's got an interesting sound to it, different pickups. My Les Paul's got these John Suhr signature pickups that are just incredible. I love them. I use them all my guitars. But that Scala guitar had a pickup wound specifically for that. And I brought a Telecaster, and I brought a Junior that had a P90 pickup, and a Strat. That Glenn really, I have a black Strat that I used to use with Dio a lot, playing like the Rainbow stuff or whatever. And Glenn really loved that guitar. I brought that actually, no, I take it back. I was on tour with Glenn, and I had loaned that guitar to a museum in England, and then it turned out that we were going through that town and they were done with the guitar, so I picked it up and I used it, and Glenn loved it. So I brought that. I didn't use it too much on the album, but then when we got back to LA, there was still a couple of bits to do, and periodically Ben would call me and say, "Hey, can I borrow you for a couple hours? I just want to do a few things." And he'd have a little checklist, and we'd go through and just knock out little parts. We mainly used a Marshall a JMP that I bought in 1981, and that was my main amp. And then when we got to LA, Ben had a diesel amp we did some stuff with, and a Buddha amp, but primarily Marshall, Les Paul. That's pretty much it. David has a Friedman BE 100, and he's got some custom made guitars that humbucker pickups in them. He gets a giant sound. I mean, it's partly the way he plays, but he also, that amp is just, it's killer.
Yeah. Are you very fussy with your guitar takes, or do you like to get them fresh in one or two?
I prefer if I can get them in one or two. It's certainly easier that way. Periodically, though, I'll get a melody in my head, and I'll start to think like, well, what if I did this? Or, for example, this album's pretty simple. It's pretty simple. It's just riffs and stuff. But once in a while, I would get a melody for something, and I would want to try it a few different ways. So that's when I would take a little extra time. But sometimes, you know, it was funny the way Ben would produce. He would go like, if I had a melody, he'd go, oh, I really like that or whatever usually. But if I didn't have any ideas, he'd say, just go for it. So I'd go for it. I'd play something like, what do you think about that? He's like, it's all right. I'm like, all right, okay, what do you like? Is there anything? He's like, yeah, the intro's pretty cool, but after that, you lost me, you know? I'm like, okay. So I did another one. I go, well, how about that? And he'd be like, yeah, the end was good. I'm like, damn it. All right, well, I'm like, dude, I'm trying to like, this is how I want it to go. I want it to start off like this, and I want it to build into this, and then I want to put some fire on the end. And he's like, well, then do it. What are you waiting for? Quit wasting our time. I'm like, and then I'd be like pissed, not mad really at him, but kind of a little bit motivated. And then, you know, I'd say, well, that was crap. And he'd be like, no, that was pretty good, that one. Let's listen to that again. So I'd listen to it. I go, that's the worst one out of all of them. He goes, listen to it. It's got a great vibe to it. I'm like, all right, if you like it, I got to fix the end at least. He'd be like, all right, we'll do it. So it was fun to work with him because he wasn't easy. He wasn't like a cheerleader or something. He kind of wanted to bring out some things, you know?
Yeah. Tell me about the track Far Away, a 7-minute track that closes the album. How did that come about?
That came about from Glenn. Glenn, you know, we had pretty much just a straight ahead. Well, we had some different flavors and stuff, but you know, it's a groovy record. It's heavy, but Glenn, I hadn't really thought about a ballad, and we had done a ballad on the previous album, and I hadn't really thought about it. But Glenn came to me and goes, "Hey, I got this idea. I just wrote it." He was in London, and he just showed me the different parts that he had, and I said, you got everything there. If we can arrange that correctly, it's going to be killer. And I knew that I was hearing in my head already when he played it. I was hearing the way that it could be treated from my part, you know, my perspective, and how I could do certain things, layering to have it start off really gently and then build up a little bit, then come back down, and eventually slap you in the face with a heavy riff. I've definitely heard melodies over the chords that he had, and then the outro was like this cacophony of like just sound, and I did a bunch of different things on the outro that I think Ben just narrowed it down to a couple things, but I would say it's 90% of 95% of what I thought it would be, which is a really epic sounding track. I mean, there's a couple things maybe I would have tried to do differently if I had my 100% way, but I say 95% is pretty good.
Yeah. Is there a track on the album that's closer to your heart than others?
Not necessarily. I mean, stuff, you know how it is. Stuff grows on you, even whether you write it or somebody else writes it. You always put your best into it, and you put your, you know, everyone's always trying to put their stamp on everything the best they can for the value of the song. And so different, it changes, you know. I mean, originally I thought like No Other had a really great groove to it and really catchy, and then Holy Ground, that one turned out, we had demoed that song early on, and made a few changes when we got to France, and it just blossomed into a kick-ass opener and had a lot more colors to it than it did on the original demo. But yeah, there's I think Saving Grace is a really cool track. I love that that track. But yeah, I would say that they're all cool. I go through, you know, I'll change my opinion periodically.
Yeah. The Dead Daisies have always been a collective of musicians rather than a permanent set of musicians. Is that the way the band will always be, or do you see this lineup being something more ongoing?
I mean, I think it's probably the way the band is meant to be. It's not unsimilar to, I've said this before it, but it's not unsimilar to early Deep Purple. It was around about, maybe we're still finding our legs, and maybe this is the lineup, but you never know. I mean, with a band that's set up to be a collective, it gives people freedom. They can do what they want. They can come and go. That's basically what, John wanted to focus on solo material for a while. So he's been doing that, and it's all amicable. We're very much into the idea. But what was great about Glenn coming in was that it was a hard turn to something new. And I think that's a good thing. I mean, you know how sometimes you get these bands and they'll change members, especially singers, and they'll put out a record that's pretty much exactly like the other stuff that they've got. Thank you. Sorry. So sometimes bands will put out a record that's exactly what they got with a new member, and that's okay. But I think that what we did together with Glenn was, for us, a good blend of, Glenn brought in his sound, and David maintained the sound of the band, but we wrote a little differently because we have a different lead singer, and he's also, he's the majority of the songwriter, because he's writing not only music but lyrics and melodies.
Yeah. What do you hope that people get out of listening to Holy Ground?
At this point, my friend, I hope that people just find some reprieve, some like a minute to forget about their troubles. They can find the music inspiring somehow to give you energy, or support your feeling, whatever it is. That's one of the things we put out Unspoken last year. It was like, wasn't meant to be the first single or first release of the album, but it worked out well because we were in the middle of this crazy pandemic, and it just felt like a good song to center people a little bit. So hopefully people will just find some music that they can relate to, and that they are inspired by.
All right, Doug, Holy Ground is out now. It's a great album. It's been great to chat. Thanks for joining us.
I really appreciate that, Greg, and it's great to chat with you. And I really hope we get to come down under, if not this year, the next year. I mean, this year is definitely looking like it's going to be half a year at the most of any kind of touring situation. But and that's an if. But at some point we will be back. This album needs to be played live. We wrote it with being live in mind, and we've got a new production to go along with this whole thing, and we're really excited about it. So as soon as possible, we'd love to come visit.
All right, man. We'll catch you next time.
All right. Thank you so much, Greg.